Hey everyone! I am at the Ives Road Fen, which is just outside of downtown Tecumseh. And this is a really special wetland area that we're going to be exploring today. So we'll learn all about what wetlands are, we'll learn what exactly a fen is and what makes that an even more special wetland. We'll talk about the things that live here, we'll take a tour of the cool plants that we find, talk about how the Nature Conservancy, who owns this land, even came about owning it. So let's go! As we're walking around the Ives Road Fen today, we're going to be looking for the three characteristics that make up a wetland. The first one is hydrology, and that's just a fancy way to say the water. So we'll be looking for any water that we see, and we'll pay attention to where it's coming from or where it goes. The second ingredient that makes up wetlands are the plants, which we see all around us. Now there's special plants that live in wetlands, and we'll see if we can find any of those today. So keep your ears open and keep your eyes open for any special wetland plants that we see or talk about. The third characteristic that makes up a wetland are the soils. Wetland soils are very unique. They are usually saturated, which means full of water, and they have wetlands have different water and soil chemistry. So we will talk about that, but keep your eyes open for any of those characteristics that you see in our tour of the fen. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's rushing water coming from the hillsides here. And we are on one of the bridges that goes over one of those little streams that comes from the hillside in the fen. And we see all kinds of different plants that are blooming. And it's late fall, so it's kind of interesting to see all these blooms happening. And let's take a little tour of some of these plants. Right here, we have a really special plant called Shrubbycincofoil. Now this is one of those plants that will only grow in fen habitats. So we call this an indicator species. That just means that this plant indicates that the area it's growing is a fen. So Shrubbycincofoil is a woody plant. If you touch it, you can feel it's kind of woody. It's shrubby. It doesn't get super huge, and it's got these beautiful yellow flowers that have 5 petals and still holding on blooms right now. Then we have this plant, which is a super cool plant as well. It's called Fringed Gentian. And the reason it's called Fringed Gentian is because it has this fringe, if I can zoom in here, and if it'll focus, come on there. Yes, if you see, it's got fringes right on the edges of its petals. And right now it's cloudy out, but when it gets sunnier, the plant senses that and it actually opens up. And you can see there's 4 petals here. It'll open up and you can see the insides of the Fringed Gentian. But these are also plants that grow specifically in wet areas, and they typically like to hang out in fens. Another plant that can be an indicator of a fen like this is called Ohio Goldenrod. Now there's a lot of different species of goldenrods, and I'm sure we can see many different kinds if we look out at the prairie fen here at Ives Road. But the Ohio goldenrod loves fen areas, and it has adapted to live in such places. So we'll take a look at it. It's kind of got this rounded top of a flower head, and it grows with the flowers all at the top. So some goldenrods, you'll see flowers coming up from the stem, but Ohio goldenrod is all flowering at the top. And just like all other goldenrods, it's a beautiful yellow color and it flowers in the fall, just like we see here. It might be a little tricky to see here, but this is what was once an agricultural ditch. This area used to be owned by a company and by other people that didn't know the value of the fen that they owned. So they tried to farm the area. And this is common with a lot of wetland areas. People would drain them, and since there was so much organic soil, they were able to grow crops like corn and soybeans very easily on it after the wetness was drained from it. And this is what they were trying to do by creating this ditch, which is a little hard to see, but you can kind of tell it's a ditch. They were trying to drain the wetland, but because of this kind of wetland, a fen, it's completely groundwater fed. So the water that you hear, if I stop talking, is always flowing out of the hillside. And when the people who own this area realized that, they realized it was going to be pretty hard to try to completely drain the area. So there's different reminders that this landscape was used for other things besides preserving it for its ecological habitat. Can you see all this vegetation that's been smashed down here? This is all from deer. They were laying down here and I accidentally scared them as I was walking towards them. So they ran through the wetland area over into the trees that you see. So deer are one of the animals that use wetland habitats. They don't rely only on wetlands because you see them in a lot of different forest habitat. But they like to use them because of all the plants that grow here. There's a lot of food that they can eat here, and it provides cover for them, just like you saw here, for safety when they're resting. Same goes for all kinds of different bird species. You can hear a lot of birds right now chirping around. They're landing in some of the shrubs around here. So birds are very commonly seen in here, especially birds of prey. Since a wetland area like this is somewhat open, they're able to hunt, especially if they're raptors like hawks or falcons. They can hunt in this open area pretty easily as they can see the mice and voles and small songbirds that they're hunting. So deer, birds of prey, these are some animals that love to use wetlands, but they don't necessarily completely rely on them to survive. But there are animals that do rely on wetland habitats like this to survive, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. Don't let this beautiful plant fool you. This is a wetland indicator plant, meaning that it grows in wetland areas, specifically fens. It's called poison sumac, and in the fall it's one of the first to turn this beautiful red color, but it can cause some serious itching and burning if you touch it, if the oils get on your skin. So I'm not going to touch it, but this is one of our wetland indicators. Like I said, it has many little leaflets that you see coming off the main stems. See, there's one leaflet, or one leaf has all these little leaflets on it. And they are related to another native Michigan plant called Staghorn sumac. And one of the differences is how many leaflets there are, but also the poison sumac grows in a lot more wet places like this, and the stems are smooth, where the Staghorn sumacs have fuzzier stems at the end. So we took a look at poison sumac, and this is its relative, Staghorn sumac. This is not poisonous, it won't make you itchy, and in fact, these seeds on the top of it can actually be used to make a tea that tastes really good. So you can see how similar its leaves are, or what remains of the leaves, to poison sumac. And that's why it's so important that you know what you're looking at and have possibly a field guide to help you, so you don't get itchy by accidentally touching something like a poison sumac. So you can see how open this fen area is. See how there's not a whole lot of trees or shrubs growing out there? That's a good thing, because that means the native plants that are supposed to be growing there, often wildflowers or grasses, are able to grow with as much sunlight as they need. But unfortunately, sometimes when people move into the area, they carry things like invasive species, which could include things like purple loosestrife or Phragmites, which are both plants that are from Europe or Asia, and they can outgrow the native plants. Another problem when people aren't properly taking care of the native landscape like a fen is they don't realize the importance of fire to a habitat. So fire was used to maintain places like this and a lot of other natural ecosystems in Michigan. And that was to cut back the shrubs that would encroach a fen area. And you can see there are some shrubs that are starting to come closer and closer to the fen area. We see the forest here. Here's kind of a layer of shrubs, and then out there is the fen. So what the Nature Conservancy does is they set fires in here, which are called prescribed burns, and those are meant to get rid of invasive species and to cut back on the amount of shrubs here. Because like I said, invasive species and shrubs can outgrow those plants that are special to the fen and that provide a lot of habitat and food for different things like pollinators, butterflies, bees, and all kinds of other animals. As we're hiking farther into the fen area, we have come onto the trail that separates upland habitat, which is more dry. It's got a lot more trees, a lot more plants that are not able to tolerate flooded, saturated soils on this side. And then the fen area on the right side, where you can see a lot of those wetland indicator species, things like Shrubbycincofoil, cattails are growing out there. So we're on the divide, right? And we're going to be seeing species that we talked about using this divide, like deer, squirrels, and there's actually a treat in this pipe, if we can see it. This little shadow. Here we are. He's a little tree frog. How cute is he? Tree frogs will use these divide areas where there's wetland habitat and also forest habitat to survive. And he seems to like this groundwater testing pipe. Now, the special thing about tree frogs is that they will survive the winter by going into a hibernation state, and they will be able to freeze part of their bodies. They go under leaf litter, and they're able to just slow their body way down so they don't have to get up and eat or get up and drink or anything. And then in the springtime, once it warms up, their body senses that and it starts waking them up. So pretty cool animal that uses wetland and upland habitat here. Whenever we're exploring wetland habitats, we can use evidence from animals to know that they've been here. And I just came across some feathers from a special animal that uses both upland and wetland habitat. And these are from a turkey. So they use wetland habitat. They often nest kind of close to wetland habitat, which is right over there. And they like to eat insects and things from the forest floor. In upland habitats, they also eat acorns and other things too. Another really special animal that uses both upland and wetland habitat is called the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake. This is the only venomous snake in Michigan, which means it has venom in its fangs that it injects to stun and kill its prey. And this is a species that lives in fens. It lives in wetland areas, which is so crazy to think that a snake would do that. But that's because it has abundant prey. So small mammals like shrews and voles, they live in that wetland habitat, and they are the perfect prey item for the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake. It is on the endangered species list in Michigan and in the US. And the reason that is because its populations are declining. The reason that would be, if you have any guesses, go for it. But the reason that is because wetlands haven't always been protected, especially fen areas. So the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, since it uses mainly wetlands, it was being hurt because of humans developing wetlands. So it was getting its habitat taken away, which meant it couldn't live anywhere and it couldn't get its food that it needed. So that's one reason its populations were declining. Another reason is because when people see rattlesnakes, they get kind of scared and they kill them. And that's definitely not something we should do when we see a rattlesnake, especially in Michigan, because it's on that protected list. And it's so important for our environment. In fact, rattlesnakes and other snakes that eat rodents like mice and voles and things, that reduces the amount of diseases that could be transmitted by these rodents. So they're actually helping us out. So if you ever get a chance to see such a cool snake like the eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, you should keep your distance for sure, but also just enjoy it. Oh boy, this is probably the most exciting place in the fen. You might be thinking, what is she talking about? This doesn't look exciting. Well, let me give you a little history so you can understand what's going on in this area. So right behind us, or in front of us, this is a hill. And as you can see, we are kind of in a low spot as we're looking up in this hill. And this hill was formed a long time ago when glaciers were moving stuff around, and they moved all this sediment with it as it was moving and deposited it here in these hills. So the sediment in the hills is mostly sand, along with a lot of different nutrients. And the main nutrients with it are calcium and magnesium. So underneath our feet, groundwater is always moving, and it's moving through these hills as well. So as the water underground is moving through hills like this, that has this calcium and magnesium, because of the water chemistry, the water picks up those calcium and magnesium nutrients, and it flows and flows and flows underground, and it comes out to the surface. And sometimes it comes up in areas like this, or it comes up from the ground a little closer to the hillside and flows down into places like this, like we see here. And when that water that has the magnesium and calcium in it flows around, it comes out of the ground, those nutrients precipitate, which means it forms a kind of slurry, and those nutrients are deposited in places like this, and this is called a marl pit. That just means that it's full of those nutrients, calcium and magnesium. And we're going into some deeper chemistry here. Calcium and magnesium cause the water to have a higher pH. So whenever water has a higher pH than 7, that's basic. When it has a higher pH than 7, that means it's alkaline. And that makes it hard for certain plants to grow because they're used to that basic pH. So plants around here, they are able to tolerate different pH levels because they've adapted to life here. It's where they learn to grow and to survive. This is the remnants of a plant called Tuberous Indian plantain. It's a species of concern in Michigan, meaning that its habitat is so infrequent that it needs protection in order to keep populations up. So, Tuberous Indian plantain grows in this special marl pit area, and it has these really kind of thick, juicy leaves. They got kind of wavy edges, and they've got the veins that are coming out from the same spot here. Tuberous Indian plantain has a white flower when it is flowering, but it turns a beautiful color like you see here in the fall. So not only is the pH affecting how plants are growing, it's also the saturated soils. You can see the water that's on top of the surface here, but the water in the soils underground or underneath all this plant material is still wet. So the plants have had to adapt to that as well. And the reason that some of these plants have adapted really interesting ways to get more nutrients is because they can't get the nutrients they need from the soil. So they have had to adapt and get nutrients from somewhere else. Does anybody have a guess where some of these really cool plants get their nutrients? If you guess that those plants get their nutrients from animals, you are correct. There are 3 different kinds of carnivorous plants that live in fens. And the first one we're looking at is called Bladderwort. These live actually in the water in a fen. So as it's coming, this water is groundwater coming from the hilly areas we looked at earlier. And you can see it's a very tiny plant. This bladderwort is called bladderwort because there are very small little sacs that grow on the plant. Very hard to see, but this is a bladderwort. And those bladders sense when a tiny microscopic organism is swimming by it. And so it'll suck in water as it senses that, and it'll suck in that microorganism as well. And within those bladders are digestive juices. So the plant will actually digest that little microorganism and get its nutrients that way. The second kind of carnivorous plant in a fen is called a pitcher plant. And that's what we're looking at here. They turn a really bright red color in the fall. And pitcher plants get their name because of the shape of the plant. It's shaped like a pitcher and it holds water. So within this plant is actually digestive juices that are down inside at the bottom. And when an insect flies or crawls into a pitcher plant, it's unable to get back out because it has these little tiny hairs that are growing on the sides, the inside of the pitcher plant. It makes it impossible for the flies or bugs to get out of it. So they get really tired and they have to land somewhere, and it lands in that digestive liquid and gets eaten by these pitcher plants. The third type of carnivorous plant that can be found in a fen is called a sundew. Now these are another one that needs to capture insects in order to get the nutrients it needs. And they do that by attracting those insects to the sticky, they look like beads of water on their leaves. And see how it's kind of shaped like a paddle? The insect will go towards the paddle end and it'll get stuck in those sticky beads of liquid, and those are actually digestive enzymes. So the bug will trigger a response in that plant, and it'll start rolling its leaf towards the center. And as it's rolling, that bug will become trapped in those sticky hairs, and it'll be digested by those enzymes as it's rolled up. So This is very, very tiny. This is a really small one. And for reference, here is my fingertip. So it's very hard to see some of these plants. They like to be hidden. This guy is kind of hard to see, but he is a wetland species of frog called the cricket frog. This is really cool that we're able to see him, because usually in the fall time they're starting to kind of burrow in the ground where they're going to hibernate. Cricket frogs are another one of those species of concern in Michigan, as their habitat is mainly these really special wetland areas, including right here in the fen. So really cool that we're able to see him. I know he's so hard to see, but it's just very special that you're able to see this guy. So as you know, frogs need wet skin. That is because they breathe through their skin and the water helps them do that. So these frogs also breed in wet areas, especially wetlands, because wetlands often don't have fish, which are big predators for things like frog eggs. So different frogs love laying their eggs in wetlands because of that. So before the Ives Road Fen became protected by the Nature Conservancy, it was owned, like I said, by some different people who used the area to mine this marl. And the reason they did that was because it was full of that magnesium, that calcium, and they supplemented that. They put it on their agriculture fields whenever they needed those minerals on their agriculture fields. So you can see it's kind of a pasty, sandy kind of mixture there. So this was basically mined for its value. And the reason that it's now protected is because a local person wanted to see what was down on the other side of this hill, and they saw all these different plants, and thankfully this person was a botanist, so he knew what the value of these plants were. So he actually wrote to the DNR and the Nature Conservancy and different organizations to let them know what was down here and how valuable it was. And they listened to him, and now this land is protected so that the fen, its plants and its animals, like this little cricket frog that's been sitting here, can survive. So it's something really cool that if you ever find a really interesting place that you don't know if anyone knows about, you are able to make that change and protect wetlands and other habitats just like he did. All right, you guys have learned a lot about wetlands and about the fen that we were visiting. Now it's your turn. What are some things you think that you could do to protect wetland areas and fen areas just like this? If you said anything like keeping our water clean, that is a huge component of keeping our wetlands clean. That can look like a lot of things. So making sure we're not dumping anything down the drains or our storm drains outside of our houses and the road is a really good way to start. So making sure we're not dumping oil or household cleaners or anything in those places, putting them where they belong instead, is a great way to keep our wetlands and waters healthy. Another thing you could do is plant native plants. That sounds pretty easy, right? Why would native plants be so great for the environment? Well, the reason that is because native plants, like we talked about earlier, have the ability to soak up a lot of nutrients. And nutrients can come off the landscape in a lot of ways. They can come off of our lawn. If we fertilize it, it can come off agricultural fields when they fertilize those, and they can come off of roadways along with a lot of other contaminants. So native plants are able to soak that all up and store it within them. So not only that, native plants are really easy to take care of, so they take less water and care to keep alive, which is great if you don't have a green thumb like me. So planting native plants is a huge way to keep water cleaner. Not only that, it'll attract more cool things like butterflies and birds and who knows what else, because our ecosystems all start with plants, right? So those are a couple ways that you can keep our water clean. If you have more, please share them and see what you can do, because we're all connected. All of our water is connected, as you learned, and there's all kinds of things we can do to keep it clean and to preserve the habitat that we have here.